Joining me now, Craig Fugate. He was a former FEMA administrator under the Obama administration. Before that, a state emergency management director in the state of Florida. So he knows a thing or two about the aftermath of a hurricane in that state. Craig, first of all, from your personal experience, just assessing the scope of the damage here, what's your initial assessment?
Well, the way I've been describing it is this is Southwest Florida's Hurricane Andrew. And it's going to change a lot of things. I mean, if you think about Hurricane Andrew, it was a big forcer to change, one, how the state responded to the disasters, but also the generation of statewide building codes. So I think what we're going to see coming out of Southwest Florida and looking at the type of damages and looking at what the water did, what the storm surge did, is hopefully, as we rebuild, we don't build it back the way it was. We build it for the future, and we build it for the risk that these storms are not once-in-a-lifetime events. They're occurring more frequently.
Andrew was in '92. That hit South Florida largely and obviously was massively destructive. I still remember it. I was 13 years old. The largest hurricane disasters by dollar amount, Katrina is near the top, but two of the top five have happened in the last 5 years, Harvey and Maria, Sandy, and then Ida in 2021. What are the immediate things that need to happen on the ground in Southwest Florida right now in the aftermath of this to make sure that people are safe and secure and have shelter and have access to the things they need?
Well, what you're seeing today, the real focus is search and rescue, getting the people that have been cut off, perhaps injured, and getting them to the high ground. And then it's getting roads up. You can't do a lot till you can get in there, and everything from getting utilities up to trying to get a handle on how bad the housing situation is. You heard from people there, nowhere to live. And this is where FEMA has been working with the state to put together their housing task force. One of the things that the president's declaration will allow is to provide renter assistance. But there's so much devastation there. There may not be enough housing in the region. So where can people go? You know, we saw this with Hurricane Maria. People actually had to leave Puerto Rico and come to New York, Orlando, to get places to live while they were rebuilding. So, you know, these are questions that are having to be answered in real time, but all of this is in the backdrop of still a situation where search and rescue is taking place. People are still having to be accounted for, and that's going to take some more time, and that's the priority for the responders.
Yeah, I remember we were down there 5 years ago for Irma, going by a shelter that I believe was a hockey stadium in Lee County. Thousands of people in there because they had evacuated their homes. And, you know, what you quickly realize in all those situations is a facility like that can work for 24 hours. But, you know, after that, it's not a place that you can put people up. It just doesn't really work for that. It's not designed for that. And to your point about the sort of supply of safe housing, I mean, that seems like that's going to be a real challenge for state, local, federal officials to make sure people have places to stay.
Absolutely. And if you think about Irma, a lot of those folks could go back home.
Right.
But for this storm, there's nothing to go back to. So that will be, you know, as we deal with search and rescue and those immediate needs, that's going to be the next phase is where do we put people? Where are the longer term shelter options? Like you point out, you want to get them out of those emergency shelters and get them somewhere else where they can get the basic needs. They have a place to stay. They got, you know, all the you know, stuff they're going to need. But rebuilding here and getting enough housing back, that's going to be a huge challenge because it's not only, you know, looking at where people are going to live. Think about trying to get the economy back if you don't have any workers. So there's a lot of stuff that's going to be happening that people are having to think through that are going to have, you know, major ramifications days, weeks, and months out.
So you got to get the grid and the roads back up. You got to get emergency services restored, of course, then shelter. I want to circle back to what you said in the beginning about this being Southwest Florida's Andrew, and that Andrew changed things. I mean, I was reading last night about Cape Coral. There were new FEMA-issued flood maps that were put out, I think, in October 2021, in which huge parts of Cape Coral were in areas that had elevated flood risk. In fact, zones that essentially required mandated federal flood insurance. And people were upset about that. And I understand when the government announces, hey, your premiums are going to go up and you have to buy this flood insurance. There was a huge political back and forth. But the fundamental issue here is the risk profile has changed in these places. And it just seems like that's going to have to center in the discussions about rebuilding.
Yeah, this is being played out. I mean, Florida may be the canary in the coal mine, but this is being played out across coastal areas in the nation. And as FEMA has been updating those risks, what it will mean is when people go to rebuild and their homes have been destroyed, they're going to have to elevate it. That's going to add more cost. And I think there's this tendency, we fight this so much, but I think we need to be forward thinking. If we're going to rebuild in these high hazard areas, it doesn't mean we can't develop. We're going to have to change what we're doing and how we're doing it. So when these storms hit in the future, there'll be damages, but it won't cause the catastrophic losses we're seeing from this storm.
Yeah, that really is the big question of how much we integrate that. What about 6 months out? I mean, what about the sort of not the long term of rebuilding, but making sure that people, some semblance of normalcy can be restored? What's the sort of post the next few weeks agenda here?
Well, once you start getting, the search and rescue winding down, you really start focusing on how much infrastructure can you get back up. You've already heard it's not even going to be, practical to repair the power system in some places. They're just going to have to build it back completely. But you want to get things like your fire stations and law enforcement, hospitals, and all of that up and running. You need to get businesses back up. One of the things you got to remember is there's a permanent residence down there, but it's also a big tourist destination, and their season is the winter months when it's dry,
right,
and pleasant. And so getting that up and getting hotels open just to get the economy. They've been clobbered from COVID. Now this, and that's going to really impact this economy.
All right, Craig Fugate, always great to get your perspective on these kinds of things, given your experience. I really appreciate you making time with us tonight.